All right, we're live. Welcome in, everybody. Joined this evening by Michael, aka Maynard M. Leeds United faithful on Twitter. Please follow Michael on Twitter. It is very enjoyable content. I think a couple of your stuff has gone viral. The biggest thing is the skeleton. You had a nickname for him, right? This is the
My daughter nicknamed the skeleton when I want to say she was probably about 4 years old. Now, my daughter, even at the age of 4, knew that she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. And at the time, she said she wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. So she was obsessed with skeletons. She wants to
oh
be a
wow.
gastroenterologist now. Actually, she's 8 now. But yes, she nicknamed. She had this like large skeleton. You can see it in the pictures that I've tweeted out, like almost a life size type skeleton. All the joints were manipulated, whatever. And the skeleton's name was Henrietta Skelly Skelly. And yes, Henrietta was dressed up in some Leeds gear, and there you go. Yeah, that was my photo. I know it's done the rounds. I know lots of people have uniquely shared this photo for various reasons, but it is the original. And as you can see, that shirt is my strongbow right here. It's the corner of my office. The clock is just up here. That is, in fact, my office. I'm sitting at that desk, different chair, new chair now, but the same desk,
Okay.
different computer.
Yeah.
It is, in fact, my original photo, and I know it's been a fan favorite that comes up on social media every once in a while. People posting various things about what Leeds United has done to them, has turned them into, has caused them to turn into. So yes, it's
and this
become
is
a
the
bit of a
latest
figure
one
of
you
fun,
used.
a bit of a
We're
legend on the internets.
we're waiting for the season to end
Yeah.
or something.
The
I think it's the
original
latest round.
photo was taken on deadline day when we were waiting and waiting and waiting for the Rafinha deal to be closed.
Right.
That was the original. So I posted that photo. I took that. I don't know. I had the skeleton was down here in my office for some reason because my daughter was dragging it around. And I was like, oh, this would be funny. And I put it in my lead stuff that was all sitting here. As you see, I've added more shirts to the wall since then. As I said, it was the day that the Rafinha deal, we were waiting on that one to close. And it was one of those ones that kind of went late, right?
Yeah.
So I think the original post was waiting for the Rafinha signing announcement.
Yeah. Well, it's been excellent content. It has gotten around. I think it's been copied and pasted and everywhere, and people are now using it for good running. It's nice to be part of the social media community too. The fabric,
Yeah.
that skeleton. So, well, excellent. And then another thing that went viral is you retweeted a moment where Marcelo Bielsa got out of his car to acknowledge a
A
disabled
young
fan.
supporter.
Um,
Yeah, a young
and
supporter, I believe, in a wheelchair, I think. And it was after the Derby game, the season we went up. I think it was really a big, very popular video. I decided, there you go. So a really very popular video at the time. Not my original content by any stretch, but someone else had posted that again. I think just with all the turmoil going on and just sort of a reminder of what we were saying. And I was really just sort of piggybacking on that by sending out a quote tweet saying, like, the one thing I think that really hurts a lot with all of this, maybe the most, is the fact that our club seems to be in a place right now where we're not just losing on the pitch, but we seem to have lost our dignity in a lot of ways. We've become a laughing stock, both on and off the field. And there have been a lot of things going on off the field as well. And I mean, we've seen the way that some of the players were behaving the other day in the team hotel, and I know that news has since come out, and I'm very glad to see that a few of the players actually did stop and speak with that young man who was looking for autographs and stuff, and that's wonderful. As well, they should. But I think for me, there's a real problem with the way that a lot of the players were sort of just ghosting him, like they're just sort of walking by, just totally blanking him, like he wasn't there, like no one was there, headphones in over their ears, hoods up, staring at their phones, and not just like sort of like casually just looking at their phones as they're walking, but like determinedly staring,
getting the heck out of there.
intent on ignoring the fans. And I'm like, look, I don't want to be too hard on players necessarily. I mean, I think, players need time to get themselves in the correct headspace. Maybe interacting with fans at that moment in time isn't something that they like to do because they're focused. But I mean, they're on their phones. I don't know what they're doing, but with their headphones on and looking on their phones, I'm sure they're not going over tactical plans at that point. They're leaving the hotel. It's a couple hours before the game. I don't think really, well, I was dialed in, is a real excuse at that point. These are fans that, it was down in Bournemouth. These are fans that quite possibly were, unless they lived down in that area, are fans that traveled an extraordinarily long way at great expense to see the players play. And as we know, just a couple hours later, the performance on the pitch was catastrophic anyway. I would say that in times when your team is struggling on the field, those are the times where I think logic would dictate that you spend even more time focusing on off-field things to make sure that there's still a connection with the fans, because the fans are going to be really upset about what's going on the field. So put the extra effort in. If it's going badly, put the extra effort in when you can, right? Every little marginal bit helps. And a lot of fans are talking about how they feel really disconnected with the club right now. And that's sort of really what my version of that tweet, my quote tweet, was really getting at, which is just that it seems to me that there are problems that go far beyond just what's happening on the field. Yeah, it feels like we've lost our way. And I think it's a timely reminder of just how much Marcelo Bielsa really meant to this club, not just in terms of the emotional connection that he made with the fans, but just in the sense of pride in everything, in every aspect of the club that he demanded. I mean, he, obviously we know he's not the owner. He wasn't the owner. He wasn't in charge of all operations, but he set a tone and a standard of excellence, right? He created what I call a culture of excellence around the club, and expected everyone to be rising to that level. And for a while, for 3 years, that's exactly what happened. And then, of course, in the summertime, between our 9th place finish, 3 points off of a European place, and the season that followed, serious injuries, players just burning out as they would, a failure to recognize the end of a fairly naturally occurring 3-year cycle. All the things we've talked about before. We don't need to really go in and dissect that again. Obviously, a lot happened and it fell apart. A lot of it fell apart because we didn't continue on the way that we should have. We let our standards slip. And I don't think Marcelo let his standards slip. I think he still demanded as much as ever. But I think there came a point in time where those around simply weren't able to deliver on those high standards at that level for so long. And we didn't properly plan for, I think, some changeover, some squad churn, and players were really in the red zone for a very long time in terms of their physical outputs. That's why we saw so many injuries occurring. That's why we ended up in times with benches full of teenagers, almost none of whom are playing football above a League One level now. So really, it's unbelievable that we thought that we could go into a season, and then in January, we all know the way that Angus dealt with that one. So, telling us all that we have a pathway and everything else. So, yeah, I think we really let ourselves down, and since that time, I think we dug ourselves a really deep hole. And since that time, we've been trying to dig ourselves out of it, but it really doesn't seem like we have been. Instead of digging out, we've just kept digging down. A real rut.
Yeah, we've been digging down. That's
when you're in a hole, stop digging. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah.
We haven't really done ourselves any favors.
No,
it's not for lack of trying. I think we made a change in direction, and a very deliberate one. Jesse Marsh's appointment was not reactive. It was reactive in the sense of the timing of it, because obviously it came in the back of sacking Marcelo Bielsa 3 months earlier than his contract would have ended anyway. But the plan was always to appoint him. I mean, let's be honest about this. Victor Orta had gone out, had sought Jesse Marsh, had earmarked him, and had him convinced that we're going to bring him in a few months later anyway. That was the long-term plan. That was a deliberate plan. He was the guy that these guys wanted in charge. And obviously that was an error in judgment, perhaps an error in judgment made in good faith, but that was clearly an error in judgment, and one which they refused to recognize and to fix. as early as possible. They kept delaying and delaying and delaying and let it slide and let it slide. And now we see stories emerging, and who knows what the veracity of these things is. But, there were rumors and stuff at the time as well that really we were looking to get rid of Jesse Marsh potentially at the end of last season. And then we decided to change their mind because we were able to stay up by essentially fluking a win against 9-man Brentford, who were on the beach, and because Wout Weghorst missed an open sitter playing against Newcastle. So, we lucked our way to staying up last season. Let's be clear about that. It was a very lucky escape on the very last day in circumstances that incredibly favored us in a way that no one could have imagined going into that day. For them to have a player red carded and then to make all their subs before someone else had to go off injured. I mean, that's not something that you expect to happen in a game. And they were on the beach. We were not. So, it was lucky. And
what's
honestly,
even funnier is Jesse trying to market himself as somebody that can keep teams up.
Well, that's right. And there was
without really unpacking that, and maybe teams were, but the fact that he was trying to get jobs at Southampton and Leicester, and the rumors were they liked the fact that he kept Leeds up under this duress. But it's like you unpack that season, those games, and was not that easy. I mean, he almost lost to Norwich. I mean, he was that was a miracle goal. And I remember we're going down. This was to draw. The Timo Pukki I don't know if Pukki finished it, but I think he put the cross in. But it was just like, this team's going down. And then here we are again.
That's it.
It's just, the past 18 months have been a massive head scratcher. I mean, if you even want to go back to like the January transfer window of 2022, Marcelo Bielsa's January transfer window, where they just didn't even back him. And even that summer, I mean, the summer, maybe you say naivete with finishing 9th and thinking that you could add a couple pieces and be okay. But after that winter and really kind of seeing like the Chelsea game, how we went into that Chelsea game, how we went into that Man City game, really with kids on the bench and not getting anyone in, was just really arrogant, naive, and bad. And that's probably, as Leeds fans, where we really should have started scratching our heads a little bit. But and we did, but I think anyways, and I want to say
I tried, but most people didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. I think you were starting to see stuff. Yeah, that there was starting to be, I don't know, cracks in the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Well, the same was true of the summer before, going into that season, right? Going into that season. And it wasn't my original thinking. I in a group with some friends, and some of them were discussing the data and showing that at the end of our 9th place finish season, we were overperforming by a significant amount. And then looking at the data in terms of, I mentioned earlier about some players being in the red zone in terms of their physical output, and just sort of showing all these things, talking about it and whatever. And I was, more of a listener at that point, to be honest, because I'm no expert in these things, but they certainly convinced me. And when I started looking into it more and discussing it more with other people, I was absolutely convinced that we need to be doing more in that transfer window going into the second Premier League season with Bielsa. I said as much. And I also came out and said, I believe it was in August of that year, very, very shortly after that horrendous preseason and our very poor early start.
Yeah.
That I thought we were a relegation team.
I remember following your Twitter and stuff. You were kind of saying that after the preseason, I remember
after the preseason
you of last year, where we were we lost to some Spanish teams.
Well, we lost to Ajax pretty heavily.
Ajax,
in the Netherlands, and then also
Sociedad. It wasn't Sociedad.
Was
it was
Betis? Was it
Betis?
I think it might have been them.
We got like smoked by Betis going, and
yeah,
that was
it
when
was a difficult preseason, and even it wasn't even just that we weren't playing well either. We didn't look like ourselves, all of the things that you expect from Bielsa ball, we all of a sudden were second to everything, and the players looked mentally switched off. The passes were, instead of those crisp passes and understanding where your teammates were going to be at all times because it was drilled into you, these sort of automations, right? These scripted patterns of play.
Weren't coming off.
Passes were missing by like a yard, and we're like, really? Like, why? That's not what we're used to. And it just kept happening over and over again. And
Right.
then you see mistakes creeping in. And it's very clear at that point, I think, very early on, to at least some people, and certainly it was to me. And as I said, I can't take credit for being clairvoyant or knowing more than anybody else. I had the benefit of speaking with some friends who sort of do this thing for a living. This thing being analysis, and working for clubs, and and doing coaching and stuff, and working in the media and football media, and that sort of thing, and just sort of observing and having access to some of that data. And I was very much in the camp at that point in time that things were not looking good. And I know nobody wanted to hear it at that point. And I can be a bit of a grumpy bugger at the best of times. And I understand that puts people off sometimes, but it played out.
The Southampton game.
Where it was correct. We lost. It was correct, but it was correct.
Yeah, it was correct. The Southampton game where we lost 1-0 and it was kind of unwatchable. That was, to me, a massive warning sign. That fall, I think it was October. Yeah.
The thing is that
there's starting to be some serious rot.
There did, and how the club didn't notice this, how the people who are actually in very, very high paying positions, who are experienced working at our football club, working at Leeds United, failed to see, I don't know, the forest for the trees or whatever, that all of these things were starting to add up to some serious question marks over this club is, I think to a certain level is maybe forgivable. But then when you get to a January transfer window and everyone is screaming, like at this point, everybody is now starting to panic. It's not just a few people in the wilderness shouting. Everyone's starting to get upset. And you gaslight us and double down on this plan that isn't working. I mean, that begins to move from the area of, a mistake or, an error in judgment to negligent. And negligence is not forgivable. And for me, that was really the end as far as I was concerned with the Radrizzani regime. I thought at the time, look, I don't think Rads is a bad guy. I think, he did a brilliant job funding us and floating us as necessary to get us to that point already. I will always be grateful for that. But it seems at this point that he's either out of his depth, doesn't know what he's doing anymore, has lost the plot, or really his reach exceeds his grasp.
And when you compared him to Massimino, the predecessor,
Massimino,
you're going, okay, well, yeah, he's he's doing better than that, and he's showing progress in the championship. He's getting us out. He hired a manager that we absolutely turned everything around. But I mean, it just, since the man has been gone, and I tell you what, I will say, there were people out there, and if you were, not many can say this, but if you were one of the people that said, I would rather go down with Bielsa than got a little tickle, but then or go down or have another manager, props to you, because right now it does look like we're tagged down.
I was not, by the way. I was firmly in the camp.
I was not either. I was saying we need to move on, just because he was not adapting, right? That was like the February where we were just, he kept going with plan A, and it was like, these guys are cooked, and they're kid, and the other ones that are not cooked are kids. So you have to adapt. Everybody's going, please adapt. He was very stubborn, but he was a purist. He was the probably the most purist footballing mind out there. And he was not backed. He was not backed. And so the few people that were out there saying I'd rather go down with him, props to you, because now, a year later, where it looks like we're definitely going down, We're going to need a new director of football, a new head coach, and we're all dying for new ownership. It looks like that might not happen, but you know, obviously we'd probably all love to have Bielsa back and try to at least, because his teams always had a go, even if they got pummeled. They at least gave maximum effort and went tried to go through walls for him. Um, so let's unpack the let's take a step back because we're kind of trying to see kind of where the I don't know
We've
the
zoomed out pretty far at this
yeah,
point
we
to
zoomed
look
out
at the
pretty
whole
far.
picture, but
Let's zoom out kind of in and then zoom out
and,
again if we can. But I'm interested in Orta and your take on the Orta era because it has closed and it lasted longer than a lot of the managers.
6 years.
6 years, and what you think of this man and in your club's legacy and how you begin to unpack his era coming to a close now officially, as the club statement is shared right there.
Yeah, I think as you'll probably find with most people in these positions, directors of football, you've got to take some of the rough with the smooth. I think he's got a mixed sort of a mixed score at the end of this. I think there were some things that he did well, and I think there were some things that he did poorly. I won't condemn the man as being, useless or whatever, as some people have done. And I understand the emotions, and I can appreciate the emotions around that. I think we need to be very clear that there were some very odd and extenuating circumstances around a lot of what Victor Orta had to do in his first year. A lot of people point to the very first year we had him, where we brought in a whole flood of players that really none of them really worked out very well, or very few of them did. And I agree that a lot of that was nonsense. But at the time, I think we have to recall as well that he was working with no budget and essentially had to build most of a squad from scratch. So I think he can be forgiven somewhat for basically putting together a budget, a budget kind of squad with a very low budget. As things went on, I mean, I think we've got a lot of players in that can be quite successful. That can be looked at as being quite successful for us. And I know that people have really sort of lost patience, for example, with Patrick Bamford at this point. And we know that in his first season with us, he didn't exactly light it up. And there were some other incidents and things that were a little bit embarrassing, like the phantom knockout punch there that he pretended to get hit. Again, that game by Al Ghazi at Ellen Road versus Aston Villa, game that I was actually at Ellen Road for. It was the give the goal game, and some of that kind of stuff, like the diving and that sort of thing, was kind of embarrassing. And I think he went on to redeem himself. Did Patrick Bamford? Obviously, our his next season, our promotion season. Again, he wasn't super high scoring, but he did score a lot of important goals. I don't remember how many he scored that season, but it was a few, 12 or something, 12 or 14. It was a lot, and he did a lot of other really great things. And then, of course, our first season in the Premier League, he really did light it up and was frankly one of the best strikers in the league. Injuries have really hampered him. People have said most recently that maybe he's a failure, but for £7 million, we got way more than our money's worth from a guy like Patrick Bamford. We look at guys like Pascal Struijk. I know he's been struggling a bit this season. The poor chat's been played out of position more often than not, and his confidence has taken a hit. And if you really look at Pascal, I think you can say he's no worse than the rest of our defense at this point, which have been generally quite poor. Melier, same thing. Again, I think a very high quality player that we picked up for a song. Is still
did Orta come with us
in with recent failures is still worth way more than we paid for him.
Can you remind me, did Orta come in the summer of 17?
I believe that is correct.
Okay, so he really he was responsible for Mateus Klick, who was 27 when he came in, which was a great signing. And then you have the kind of Samuel Saiz, Alioski, Pablo Hernandez was his as well. Just looking, Luke Ayling was just before him. So Luke Ayling was not him. Oh, I'm sorry. Pablo was he must have been a re-signing. Pablo was in 16 as well. It looks like, or maybe he was re-signed. I'm just looking at some of his other successes. The for whatever reason the stats lufcdata.com is not loading on my laptop. It's only loading on my phone right now because probably a lot of people have been looking at it and downloading it
Sure.
to kind of look at his incomings and outgoings. If you look at some of his like just in the Prem since promotion, you'd probably say, Meslier probably pretty good, but then you've got
Bellier is
Ian.
a successful transfer. Let's be honest. The kid
Yeah.
has racked up more appearances than any goalkeeper of his age, of under the age of 23. He has more clean sheets than any other goalkeeper before the age of 21. He has kept us in a lot of games. He has struggled the second half of last season and all of this season. And I think there are a lot of other reasons for that beyond he's crap, which is what a lot of people say these days. And again, I understand and appreciate the emotional reaction. We're losing. It sucks. It hurts. He is playing like crap. I will not deny that, but he is a good goalkeeper. He is a good player. He is very promising, and he's worth a hell of a lot more. He would have been worth a hell of a lot more a year ago, but he's still worth a hell of a lot more than we paid for him. By my books, by any book, that is a good transfer. That is a successful transfer. You brought somebody in, you increased their value, they got experience, and they helped you along the way. How is that not a successful transfer?
Yeah. There was some successes here. I mean, the Ben White loan again. I don't know how much of
Yes.
this is Marcelo or how much of that.
No, that was
Marcelo
Victor Orta.
definitely.
Marcelo wanted to put Ben White in the under 21s. That was Victor Orta.
Jack Clark and Jack Harrison came in the same window. Jack Clark was 18. Jack Harrison was 22 from City.
Is that when we loaned Jack Clark back after selling him?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the loan back really didn't work out, but
yeah.
I mean, I feel like that was more to appease the fans anyway, because they were a bit upset about letting Jack Clark go.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think the value that we got out of that transfer is well worth it at the time.
Yep.
People say Helder Costa was a failure. Helder was crucial in our season going on.
He was good.
True that he never lit it up the way that he did with Wolves or whatever, but he was a good, solid, and pretty dependable player in our promotion season. And he played a few crucial games as well in our first Premier League season. I wouldn't say that's a failure. It's maybe a little more on the mediocre side, but it wasn't a failure by any stretch.
Yeah. We've got Josh Galloway, Ian Preveda, and then John Kevin Augustin is out there right after Helder Costa.
Well, then you get into the catastrophic failures, right?
Yeah, that one's obviously still being paid for. Charlie Allen, Cody Drama, Sam Greenwood, Rodrigo, Robin, and now we go into like this is his Premier League.
Yeah.
So Robin Koch, Crescencio Somerville, Diego Llorente, could have worked. Did not. I don't think he wound up working. Amari Miller, Jack Harrison. It's a re-sign. Junior Firpo, Sean McGurk, Lewis Bate, Christopher Clausen, Leo Hielda, Dan James, Mateo Joseph Fernandez, Brendan Aronson, Christus Retton in the summer. Basically, everybody did this year. That's been very Red Bull focused.
I hear these names and I just think, strikes and gutters.
Perkins might be big for us. I'll be, down in the championship.
Perkins, Lewis Bate has absolutely cooked for Oxford this year. He is ready to come back and play a part in our team next season, whether that's in the championship or the Premier League. Probably fewer minutes in the Premier League at this stage, but he has developed incredibly well. And he is really popular there. And I think that is going to be one heck of a transfer. I think that he's going to be a player. And I'm not the only one. Lewis Bate.
So real success.
I think so.
6 years.
Things that are looking
not promising. All. You probably can't say you total and utter failure. You can't say that words with him. But can you say where did it go wrong? What got him sacked? What got him sacked from somebody that was crazy enough to blurt out to Rad Razani, "Give me a name. I don't care the price. I don't care the name." And he says Marcelo Bielsa,
Yeah.
and it changes the club's history forever. From that to give me a name, Jesse Marsh or whatever. um, it's like hard to even say. How do you,
It's
now
comical,
now
isn't
that
it?
we're like, give me a name, and then he's like,
I didn't think we'd be
this
looking back
winter's
at it
is
and
give me a
laughing so
name, and it's
soon,
like
Alex.
10. He probably said it was probably the same dialogue, but they just didn't. The fact that they didn't have a plan B was just like, give me a name, and it's like, I give you 10 names, and he's like, go get them. And Victor's dumb enough to be like, okay, I'll go get them. But none of these guys can come. They're, it's like hello. Well, what worked last time? You shouted out a name and went to get them, and it was 100 million to one. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh,
So,
Javi Grazia. But yeah, go. But yeah,
oh
but
God.
the
So
Jesse
where's it
Marsh
gone
one is
wrong for
like,
Victor? I
the
mean,
the short list this winter wasn't a bad short list. I mean, Slot, Areola,
yeah.
all of the top of the list in the
Yeah,
summer.
no,
Yeah, let's
those are
get
good.
them. But
Even Corcoran, right? Even Corcoran.
the one between those is Marsh. So that had to be a gimmick to me. That had to be, hey, let's sell more tickets and expand this thing to America. Because I don't know how else you're coming up with that name. He had success at a couple places. He was probably an up and coming coach a little bit, but this was not the job for him. He was not.
This is not an up and coming job.
This is not an up and
This is a
coming
big time.
job. This is the big boy league. This is a one club city where you can't hide. You are the face of the franchise, and you're in a major media market where you're talked about every second of the day. So I just, yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the
The
one. That was
pressure is
where he
enormous.
probably got the beginning of the end for him, was when they went and got Jesse Marsh. But what else do you say about the Victor Orta era
Well, I would say
and
that
where it went wrong?
when we look at his transfer dealings on a quantitative basis, I would say that he's right around the mark that you would want someone to be. Like, we just named off a lot of them, and we're like, good, not so good, great, failure, potential, probably not. Like, it balances out, and at the end, you're saying 40 to 60% hit rate in terms of quantity. That's pretty good. I mean, that's a reasonable amount. No one has all of their transfers work. There are many cases of many high profile flops, and lots of other players that we just never hear about because they just never make it, and they end up getting shipped out somewhere else to a lower league team or overseas or wherever. So I would say, on a quantitative basis, in terms of the player transfer business for Victor Orta, it doesn't look so bad. I think when you start to get into a qualitative analysis, and in particular, I'm looking at the money aspect, then things start to hit the skids a little bit, because some of the players that when you're going through that list, some of the players where you're going, yeah, that one didn't work out, that one didn't work out, happen to be the players that we spent the most amount of money on. And when you're a club like Leeds United that are just trying to get established again and don't have the money of the big six and Newcastle and the rest of it, or even necessarily the money of an Everton or whatever, like team that's been around in the Premier League and raking in that kind of money for a while, and is able to build a new stadium and have all these extra resources. We're just getting established, and we're still working our way through a championship squad and trying to get out of that. We can't afford to be wasting money. And when you look at blowing 25 million pounds on a guy that we end up shipping out to Fulham, in Dan James, for example, and I know Bielsa wanted James. I understand that Bielsa wanted James. 25 million pounds, that's a little bit excessive. And I think that we should have been looking at something else at that point. The money that we've apparently tied up in this potential deal for McKennie is way, way, way too much.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would necessarily have predicted that Rodrigo would struggle for the first 2 seasons, but he did. He's obviously come good this season for the most part. Not sure that he totally fits even now what we've been trying to do. all that well, but I mean, you can't really argue against his goals now. And so maybe over the course of a contract, you say that's not so bad, and that's just the going rate for a player like that. But I think it still seems like maybe a bit of an overpay. Brendan Aronson, overpay. He's again, I that's not crapping on Brendan. I think that there is a player there. There's definitely a raw skill set. I think we talked about this, I think, on the show maybe a couple of weeks ago with Nate. I think there needs to be some more development there, and I hope that there is, and I hope that it comes good eventually. But right now, not looking like the best transfer in the world, especially for that kind of money. So when we look at the money that we sort of flushed on things that haven't worked out and sort of judge the quality of the transfers from that regard, then it starts to look a little bit dicier for Victor at that point. Then you add in the next element, which is his relationship with fans. And I met Victor once. He was very gracious. He was nice. Things were going well at the time, of course. It was in 2019. Things were looking okay. We obviously went on to not proceed through the playoffs that season, but things were building. And generally speaking, notwithstanding the collapse against Derby in the second half of the semifinal that happened a few weeks later, things were looking okay at that point. I didn't have an issue. I thought that was fine. I shook his hand. I said, thanks for everything you've done. Things are looking a lot better at the club now than they were a year ago. And all of that was true at the time. He appreciated it. He was meeting with other fans. It was great. Some of his interactions with fans when the chips,
yeah.
Man. And look, I understand emotions getting the better of you. I've said already today on this pod, I've already said I can be a bit of a grouchy bugger when things are not going well. I know that. I can lose my temper and stuff as well with this club. I get it. But there has to be a certain level of professionalism. And if you're in that position, you've got to be able to take your lumps. And, this sack the board, shushing the fans business, this business of meeting fans out in the parking lot and getting into arguments with them. That kind of, they just the general yelling and other behavior towards fans who, pay damn good money to go and see the club, pay damn good money to support the club. We're here before he was here, and it'll be here long after he's gone, which is now apparently. You need to be a little bit more respectful, a little bit more professional, and I think that really is a bit of a stain on his record as director of football at this club. The last piece, of course, is the management issue, and that is how I think, first of all, how they managed Marcelo Bielsa, particularly going into that last season. Now, Marcelo was on year-to-year rolling contracts. Now, I don't know what to believe. The club have come out and said we didn't bring in any new players that one transfer, not enough anyway, very few new players, because Marcelo expected a certain level of transfer that we really just couldn't afford, or wasn't, otherwise the transfers weren't going to be any better than what we had. And they really kind of tried to shift the blame onto Bielsa over this transfer stuff. But then they turn around, when Marsh comes in and spend loads of money on players that are questionable value. I just don't really, I don't think I buy what they're saying. I think they were trying to do it on the cheap. I think they were hoping that Marcelo would be a miracle worker again. I think they were offering him dross. I think they were offering him crappy players, quite frankly. And he was saying, no, that's not good enough, because it actually wasn't good enough. I don't know if Marcelo's, he wanted Dan James, and Dan James hasn't exactly lit it up. Who knows what Dan James would be under Marcelo Bielsa in a functioning team, however. We don't know.
He turned water into wine.
We never got to see. We got to see Dan James under Marcelo Bielsa in a team that was collapsing around both of them.
And he was forced to play as a 9. Played him as a 9 for his, for his speed, I guess.
Yeah. I think you want, just to reinvigorate the press, I think was the main thing, right? Yeah. Was to reinvigorate the press, was to have someone who could help on quick breaks. Whether it worked out or not, I don't know. Maybe Marcelo doesn't have the greatest transfer judgment either. And that's possible, but he's not the director of football. So that shouldn't be his job, right? The job should be the director of football. The director of football should set the philosophy and should build a squad that can move from manager to manager. At the end of the cycle, when it's time for a manager to go, that squad should be good enough and capable enough, maybe with a few additions shuffled in and a few players moving out, just the usual kind of churn, should be good enough to be picked up and be coached by somebody else.
Yeah.
of a similar philosophy,
You know what?
and that's the problem.
As you're
They
talking,
weren't because Marsh was nothing like
no,
Bielsa.
and
They
as you're
one thing in
talking,
common.
I think that Orta will sing like a canary. I think something will happen. There'll be, months will be removed. I'm sure he signed a, non-disclosure agreement or something, uh, to get the mutual consent, and maybe a payout. Um, but I think eventually, he's going to spill the beans about what this club has a lot of leaks. Something will come out about how they came to Jesse Marsh, because I will say that is the one where it's like, I know, Javi's right there, and so is now, we'll get to Big Sam,
Yeah.
but the other ones, Slot, Areola, I mean, the other, there was, I think, three or four there. That list was very Bielsa-ish. I mean, everybody's saying Slot is basically Bielsa, very similar to Bielsa ball,
Yeah.
and
And Areola was
and it
a disciple of
is a
Bielsa.
disciple of him,
Yeah.
and so is the West
Yeah.
Brom,
Correct.
manager, is escaping me right now.
Yeah.
But and obviously coached, at Leeds United, and it was his assistant. So, anyways, but Marsh was. It's like what? Um,
So how much of that was gimmick? How much of it was commercially
how
driven? How
much
much
of
of it was
that? Yeah,
pressure,
what's going to
perhaps from
come out there to
Radrizzani?
be like? Yeah, I floated this idea to Raz, and Raz liked it because he was an
Corporate.
American. Like it was. I feel like
That's fine.
something's going to come out there where it's like, yeah, we went to Marsh because, he could coach, and we wanted to market this thing and grow this, and grow this thing to an American audience, thinking that would be a way in, that we could kill multiple birds with one stone. We could have it all. We could have our mid table and eat it too, which was not the right thinking. And obviously he was naive enough to think it was quote unquote impossible to get in this relegation battle this season. So, um, yeah, uh, I agree. You really made me stop and think about that, because it's easy to forget when you do think of his incoming players and kind of just look at it on paper like that, and then you also think of his behavior
Yeah.
with yelling back, sack the board,
Yeah.
and he was very fiery. He was a guy that you would probably not want to cross if you were on his bad side, which in a leadership position is not something that you want to have.
Well, it can be a bit of a toxic personality trait at that point, right? And that's the
Right.
problem. I
Things are
understand
not
fire and
going well.
passion to a certain point, but when it crosses that boundary into becoming a toxic trait to the point where you're insulting and making fun of your own fans, it becomes very problematic. And I think at that point it's getting pretty close to a firing offense.
Right. You're in a position that's going to take a lot of, you know,
Yeah.
criticism, no matter
That's
what. I always say, like, there's sometimes when you do an event, or you're in the spotlight, sometimes you're not going to please everybody. You don't
yeah.
know what's going on in somebody's life, and it's like that with fans. Like, fans go to games, they say stuff, maybe they're just in a bad mood for something, they come into Leeds, and they're just, the team, they're down, they lose a tight game, but they're just gonna, they're gonna shoot from the hip because they're in a bad mood. This is not that. This is just really poor performance after poor performance. But I'm just saying, like, you really can't please everybody. There's some people that wanted us to probably challenge for Europe, this year, and it's like, well, those are, you just
Those are Radrizzani problems, and I think we'll get to
yeah.
them, right? Because that's the next
Well,
thing here.
yeah. I don't even know where to unpack Rad Rosani. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
yeah,
we'll finish with
sure.
Orta
What's
first.
I mean, I just think yeah, I mean, the Orta era is, that is a heavy tarnish that you're absolutely gonna be, because
Yeah.
we live in this viral world where everybody can pick out a cell phone, and those are now etched into this history, into this legacy with him. And, it's just disappointing. At first, it was kind of like he's very passionate, obviously with the Dan James, and he was sweating bullets, and he's going back and forth with
throwing the
this
phone and all
transfer,
the
and
rest of it. Yeah.
it goes to scum and all that. The next year, that was, well, he's just very passionate. He gives a lot. He cares a lot, and now it's like, wow, this guy is a different person. When the veil is lifted and people are criticizing, and you really, that's when you show your leadership, when the chips are down, when things aren't
Yep.
going your way, when you're able to be composed and steady, and that steady hand. When you're volatile like that,
Yep.
yeah, it's that's just not a leader.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
so let's get to
Well,
Rad's Rosani. Yeah, go ahead.
if I can just finish my point on just the manager transfers first, if you don't mind, I'll just be very, very quick.
Yeah.
With Orta, you're right. I think the veil will be lifted at some point, respecting the whole Marsh thing. What we do know right now, or what seems to be common knowledge or public knowledge, is that Victor Orta and Jesse Marsh were friends. They met each other at some sort of football thing several years ago. They connected and kept in touch ever since, and so very much Jesse Marsh was Victor Orta's guy. Now, whether it came
Right.
around to the point of him becoming the manager at Leeds because of some other pressure around marketability and expanding to the US or whatever, that's entirely possible. I would
But
suggest very
I'm
strongly that
thinking
that's
that
not a 49ers thing.
no, I
That was
don't think it
definitely a
is.
Radrizzani thing, if at all.
Yes, right, and that's my point. I think
Yeah.
he throws names out there,
Yeah.
and he throws, and he throws a short list out there, and Rads kind of will say yay or nay.
Yeah, him.
You go
Yeah.
here, you go there. Where maybe if Victor was a person that would, could wave his magic wand and be the owner, he wouldn't have picked Marsh. But he was throwing names out there, and maybe Rads got obsessed with that name, or
Yep.
I don't know.
So
So,
when we
but
look at
yeah,
mismanaging Bielsa's last season, having Marsh waiting there in the wings and then bringing him in early, not recognizing the problems with Jesse Marsh and what was happening early at two critical junctures before it became too late. One, at the end of the season, we stayed up barely by luck and thinking that for some reason that they had done something miraculous to keep us up when they hadn't. And then two, just before the World Cup, when every other team with a record the same or similar to ours, including some with slightly better records, sacked their managers and gave their managers time, the new ones, time to work with the squads that weren't in the World Cup and then to have a window to themselves. That was the critical juncture where it's like if they hadn't rectified their mistake already, that was the time to do it. They failed to do it. Reports coming out now that they were going to be after Unai Emery, who who ended up going elsewhere, obviously, and doing quite well. Much to my annoyance. And but that those are the critical mistakes that this leadership team, not Victor Orta necessarily, but the leadership team in general, have made with respect to the management of this club. And then we get into the point like what you've already mentioned, right? Having a short list of players and Radrizzani now going out and saying, "Oh well, we'll have an announcement tomorrow." Nope, didn't have an announcement tomorrow. Okay, well, let's leak all kinds of names out to our buddy Fabrizio Romano. Nope, none of those guys ended up working out. Like it just became a comedy of errors and a circus at that point. And I don't know how they could possibly expect their 17th choice or whatever it was. I'm exaggerating slightly here, obviously, to come in under circumstances knowing very well that they didn't really want him and they were coming to him out of desperation. With all the fans already on edge and the season sort of, walking that knife edge as well and expecting that this was going to work. It started to for a little while. I think we had that new manager bounce, but then things fell apart and there's a bit of mystery around why that is. Maybe not mystery, maybe more intrigue.
Raz, he's been so disappointed. Just
He has.
I don't even know where to begin. He's the most.
It's impossible for us to be relegated this season. Impossible.
Yeah, he's the most disappointing.
If we're unlucky, we'll be 15th. Sorry,
it's
Alex.
Not, it's not just that. It's the trying to be in the big time and not being in the big time, like kind of attitude and making it seem like he's this big, rich guy. And it's like, look, you are rich. You've got lots of money. I could never own Leeds United, and God bless you.
Mhm.
But don't gaslight us. Don't PR spin us. You are in charge of the final messaging and some of this stuff. Like, I don't know, just this whole hey, I know you could go back and like, hey, I know the window to and like you wanted to, but hey, we got our two international strikers and a up and coming, and I guess Joe Gelhardt's still all over the shop and a big marketed person of the team. I'm not saying Joe Gelhardt Jaffe is not going to be a big part of this future, but it obviously hasn't worked out, and so I just or at least this year, um, I don't know. The whole everything I don't really want to unpack them. The Twitter stuff alone, the latest thing with Connor that's come out where he's
McGilligan, yeah.
McGilligan, it's my fault, all this stuff. We don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to hear that. That doesn't make me feel better. What makes me feel better is this club in a better position, and it's like it's not. It's not. It's worse. We're steering relegation in the face. I'm looking at a recruiting, at least managerial recruiting aspect, where you've only got one right. We're going back to Christensen. No. Uh, we're going back to Hacking Bottom. No. Uh, we're going, obviously, Marcelo comes in. Marsh, no. Javi, disaster. Now, obviously, we've got, and before then, we even had Scoops for a little bit, who was possibly going to be the interim or the person to see out the season, which they decided not to go with. So, look, this season's been it's been an absolute dumpster fire. I don't know how else to describe it. It's been a dumpster fire of a season. The fact that we're not in the bottom three is a freaking miracle, and really talks about how poor the bottom five really is. I mean, it's just the bottom five is terrible this year.
Wretched. It's
Wretched.
wretched.
And the fact that the Forest Everton game ended in a draw is is just mad. All five of these teams can't buy a result to save their lives. We have a terrible run in of games. The last four games,
The hardest of all of them.
the hardest of all of them. Shouldn't have been left up to this month, but here we are. And I'd be remiss as we come up on an hour of talking, is what your thoughts are the latest managerial transfer and Big Sam coming in. Yeah, I don't know. 24 months ago, we were all laughing at West Brom and putting 5-0. I mean, Jack Harrison was scoring screamers, and it was just an incredible game to watch. As COVID was kind of at least winding down a little bit in America, and there was some restrictions opening up here in New York State, and it was just beautiful football to watch. And now 24 months later, we are Big Sam is our manager, and he's never come in this late, really. He's attributed to negative football. What do you think? I mean,
14 months from Marcelo Bielsa to Big Sam, with Jesse Marsh, Michael Scubala, many people say who, and Javi Grazia in between, in 14 months is just on its own. Just looking at that as a chronology, looking at that on the calendar, is itself a serious indictment of the leadership of this club. And that goes back to Victor Orta, obviously, because he has a hand in appointing these people. But we know that that the board is also behind making managerial type decisions, and certainly the board is behind this one because Victor Orta is no more. I find it I mean, look, it's a Hail Mary. I get that. I can respect that. I understand it. I never thought that we would get here. I never thought that I'd be able to laugh about it, but I actually am, just because it's so ridiculous. It's one of those things where you're like, you'll laugh about this in a few years. I'm already laughing because it is just a clown show at this point. And there's nothing else we can do. There's nothing we can do about it. We just have to sit back and watch it unfold. It is astounding to me that we have gone from one thing to the other, to complete polar opposites of each other. But to be honest, it shouldn't be that surprising, because, as I said before, the only thing that Jesse Marsch and Marcelo Bielsa had in common was the intensity aspect. The football style, the philosophy, even their personal style and philosophy, they were completely polar opposites. Do you don't think that maybe that has something to do with the problems that we had? Look, again, I'm not going to go back and say that Jesse Marsch is a terrible manager, that he's crap, that he's whatever. He's obviously not the right fit. And honestly, I don't think he's quite at the standard of the Premier League yet. I don't necessarily believe in that style of football as being one that can survive in a league this good. I mean, I think that's just fair comment. That's not a comment on Jesse Marsch being crap. It's not. I'm not putting him down. It's simply saying that it was obviously and demonstrably not of the required standard. Since then, nothing has been of the required standard. We had a little bit of a bump under Gracia. That's great. Was that just new manager bounce? Was it relief from the squad? Like, who knows what caused that? But it was good for a few weeks, and then it all turned to crap, and worse than it was under Jesse Marsch, as bad as it ever was at the tail end of Bielsa era, when everyone was burnt out and had given up very, very clearly. Tom mentioned here, and we know there's rumors around, and now there's some actual news breaking from some news people as well. And again, who knows what happened, but it wasn't the Southampton game. It was Crystal Palace, wasn't it? At halftime, where there was apparently a fight in the dressing room, and it appears that Javi Gracia took sides, perhaps in a way that isn't wise for a new, somewhat temporary manager to do, caused a serious fracture in the team, caused half the team, the old guard, it sounds like, to fall out with him, and caused a real issue. Now, how much of that is true? How much of that is actually what happened? But it is suspicious, I think, that it seemed like a switch was flicked at halftime, and everything collapsed from then on.
No,
And
it's what's
everything was
happened
fine until then, and everything has been crap ever since.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something, it makes sense.
And how is this team? But how is, as adults, as grown men, how is the team as a fan? Because we've all seen it. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happened. Something happened. But how is this team still reeling from conceding a goal? Happens. I mean, not ideal. It was towards the end of halftime, and they made two really bad errors. One they got away with, and the other one they didn't. On the edge of the box, they equalized, and that's how fragile you are.
Yeah,
that little, it's like
fragile
a
is the right word.
You just, that's what broke you.
Yep.
That's what's breaking this team. Is conceding a stupid error, and obviously, whatever happened at halftime. But it's like, again, I go back to, it is in these guys' best interest to stay up if they know what's good for them, and I actually am interested in picking your brain on this, because I didn't get the full context of it in our thread. But I think a lot of them do try. I think they try to bail on the ship, but the ship is sinking now.
Yeah,
and they shouldn't be really worried about what's happening to the ship. They should just be worrying about bailing the ship out of water. Shouldn't be thinking about where they're going to get off right now, because they'll pause. It'll be the end of the season. You can figure all that crap out. But I guess all this to say is, I don't know what two thoughts. What's your thought? Let's put a bow on this. What's your thoughts on Big Sam? Do you have? You said it's a Hail Mary in the chat. You still believe that? And
Yeah.
What do you? Is it just kind of throwing a dart and hoping, kind of thing? Do you think? What do you know about Big Sam? What do you think will happen besides defensive solidity? I guess we won't probably concede 7 to City now. Will it be 3-0 kind of thing?
Well, who knows? I mean, Big Sam's team conceded 5 to us, so
Yeah.
who really knows at this point? Look, Sam Allardyce is an old school manager. He's about 67 or 68 years of age, so not a spring chicken by any sense of the term. He's not just older in terms of his age and his experience level, but he's also old in terms of his football style and ideology. And I know that you yourself, Alex, in our private chat, posted a video of him talking about basically his philosophy, which
He's
was,
direct.
why bother playing it out from the back? That's ridiculous. Just get it launched to the big man, get it in the mixer, right? I mean, that's the philosophy. So, I don't know if it brings defensive stability and if it gives us a chance at scoring goals, then so be it. I mean, I don't care at this point. It's certainly not the football that I'd want to have a whole season of. If it saves the season and keeps us up, fair enough, right? But it
They
better
do
not be
maybe
it
need
better
a
not be
little bit
completely
of.
go down next season, whether we're
He's
up or
got
down. I can tell you
he's
that.
got an incentive, right? What 1.5 million or 2
Two and
million
a
to
half,
stay
I
in?
think. So it's
Two
like
and a half.
$500,000 just to
That's
take the job for 4 weeks, and then there's like a £2 or £2.5 million incentive to keep us up. Yeah, I mean, cool.
so.
It's
What
not
is
like he
that?
needs
One
the
twenty
money.
five a game.
Hmm.
125 a game, right?
Yeah,
125
yeah,
times
base
5.
salary. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
well. So yeah, he's this is money for the grandkids or whatever. This is inheritance money for his next generation. I mean, I don't think he could. Plus of all of his career and his consulting and all that he does with the media, I'm sure he makes a decent salary already. So
I'm sure
um
he's got plenty of bank.
yeah, he's got
Yeah,
this
he
is a
doesn't need the
big,
money, but why not, right? Why not
but
get
it's
paid to have a laugh?
a
So
nice.
that's a good point, I think. Look, I mean, I think
Man,
he's a controversial figure. Of course, he was the most
he's bold.
successful English manager ever with a 100% win record before he got canned uh, for some dodgy dealings. Let's just leave it at that. He's got famous quotes about pints of wine and all those other stuff. So there's a bit of controversy around him. Why would want
He'll
to
be direct.
invite controversy to a club that already draws controversy to it naturally, that people tend to hate on for no reason anyway? I don't know, but I mean, I guess it's the last
And
the last chance you got.
when I say direct, I don't mean his football. I mean, maybe that'll be direct too, but I mean like he will
Both.
be to the players. He goes, I don't have a lot of time to waste here. This is what we're doing. This is who I'm playing, and this is why we're doing it. And by the way, if you don't do it, you'll get relegated, and I don't really care because I'm no F's given either. But this is what I think,
Yeah.
and this is what I mean. Like
The one
so
thing I
I
hear about him is that he's good at the player stuff. He's a good man manager. Players tend to like him.
mm,
That's what I've heard. I don't know, but that's what I've heard. And so, look, if he can give the players a bit of a lift for the next 4 crucial games, then maybe that'll be worth it on its own.
yeah. All right,
Especially since that appeared to be what Javi did until we had this whatever it was in the Palace game
yeah.
at
He
Elland Road.
was
Where
he was
obviously something
he
happened.
appeared to be probably very good at tactics, I'm guessing, and not good at man management because I think every game that he had started okay and then they conceded, and I would say his weaknesses were either inability, lack of ability to adjust for whatever reason. I mean, he just game to game, but in game he did not adjust, and so I would say that was a weakness, and man management was a weakness of Javi. I don't care about the media stuff. I really don't care if you're a media darling or you know,
Yeah.
I don't care about that. Just win. Um,
Yeah.
so let's
Just win.
preview a little bit of worst case scenario. I said that I said a lot. I said that I think this will be a complete, I think there'll be a lot of people leaving. You said no, won't be that bad. Um,
No.
And I don't know. I'm in two minds of that because I think almost all of these players probably do have relegation clauses. So they will be looking to leave. But then at the same time, it's like, even if you have the relegation clause, how much power do you have? So explain that a little bit more. And what do you think if we do go down, what it looks like, how many players you think leave, and, what you think the club kind of looks like in the championship?
Yeah, well, I do believe that a number of players will have relegation release clauses, and what that usually means is that there's a set price, that's usually at the low end or lower than market value, where we have to accept, a bid for them if it comes in. It essentially means there's a minimum release, right? So we get relegated, and we have to be open to marketing them at that point, and if a reasonable offer comes in, we have to sell. It doesn't mean that we don't have to release them for free. We don't have to sell them if no one bids on them. It requires a lot of stuff to happen. But do we take an active role in helping them find a new club potentially? That may be part of it. I don't know about the ins and outs of every contract, obviously. And I do think a number of players will head up to the office and be like, look, like, we I don't want to stay here. I don't want to do this. This is not where I want to be next year. So just so you know, my agent's going to be shopping me around, and you should be expecting bids for me at some point because I don't want to be here. And my expectation is that you take a reasonable offer when you get it. Or rather, the agents will be probably going in and doing that for them. I don't think the players would be doing it themselves. So maybe the agent goes in and has
It'd
that
be nice. They should do it.
Shop them around, and
Yeah.
so likely maybe the agent and the player will go in and have that conversation. And I'm sure that there are probably 4 or 5 players, maybe more, maybe 5 or 6 that would do that, potentially. But I don't think there's going to be a mass exodus. So for a few reasons. So one, financial fair play or profitability and sustainability. If we go down, we will have the benefit of parachute payments, which will put us financially in a better place than the other teams in the championship. But that doesn't put us in a financially good place. We're going to lose about 80 million pounds in one season. It's a precipitous drop in revenue. It's a very, very severe drop in revenue. Now, that will be offset somewhat by a drop in the amount of payments that we have to make in the sense that included also in a lot of the player contracts probably would be relegation clauses in the sense of pay cuts. So players will probably lose 20, 30% off their salaries should they go down. We also won't have to pay out what has been reported to be about 40 million pounds in bonuses should we stay up. So there is a little bit there that will sort of make up. But we also have about 150 million pounds in outstanding transfer debts owing to other clubs for all the players that we've brought in. Obviously, that doesn't include McKennie because if we go down, we don't keep him. So that's other than him. So when you add up sort of all the transfers and stuff that we've done recently, that makes sense that we probably owe about 150 million pounds. Now, we don't have to pay that all at once. The reason why it's debt is because you usually pay that out over the course of the contract for the player, although sometimes there may be other payment terms. But certainly in terms of booking the value or the book value, the accounting value, as opposed to the actual cash flow issue, the value of that is paid out in terms of calculating your profitability and sustainability, or your FFP, as some people call it, is plays out over the course of the contract. So we do have, I think, some issues. I don't think they're severe. I don't think it's anything like 2004. We're not up a creek. We're not going broke. We're not going to be bankrupt, but we will have to move some players for sure to cover some of those debts or to service some of those debts. We're going to have to continue to service those values. Those values don't go down. The amount that we owe to the other teams. It's not like we'll pay you 35 million for Rudder, but if we go down, we're only giving you 20. It doesn't work that way. It may work that way with Rudder's contract, but it doesn't work that way with the amount of money we're paying to Hoffenheim. So we're still going to have to service those debts with significantly less revenue. That's just going to happen. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in a position where we're probably going to have to sell at least 4 or 5 players to just keep the ship afloat and not run afoul of debt issues, right? To be able to continue to service debts and pay what we have to pay. We are then going to have to replace those players somehow. And how do we do that? So it's going to be a mixture of, I think, promoting some of the junior players because they will certainly be ready, some of them, for the championship level, even if they're not ready for Premier League level. So some of them will be able to be promoted. But if you're basically fielding a team of like 5 or 6 kids, that's dangerous. So we're going to have to bring in some fresh talent. So we will probably have to bring in a transfer of maybe 2 or 3 players, maybe on permanent transfers. And I suspect, like every other team that goes down, there might be 2 or 3 loans from the Premier League. Again, players that are looking to prove themselves just to fill out the squad. Now, we already have a lot of players in that position, the kind of players that we'd be loaning perhaps to championship teams ourselves, if in fact we were staying up. But if we're not, then we're going to use those players. But I still suspect there may be a Ben White-esque kind of loan, or at least an attempt to get someone that good loan going on to try to make sure that we have enough of a squad to compete in a 46-game championship season, as well as dealing with potential for playoffs and cup games. It could be up to 50 games.
Do you think
progress further in cups? It's a lot of football.
Do you think that we have enough to maybe be in the top 6 of the AFL next year? Do you think that is in the cards? Early doors. I mean, it's so early, but yeah.
Yes, I do, primarily because I think there's some of the key players, some of the more expensive players, I don't think will be sold. So I think someone like Jorginho Rutter will not be sold. It's possible that he gets loaned out to get his salary off the books, but I suspect his salary is going to drop anyway when we go down. I also think that a year in the championship would be good for him. The reason why I don't think we sell him is because we're not going to make any profit. What's the point in selling him unless we're so desperate to get his wages off the books? What's the point in selling him if there's not going to be any profit in doing so? We've only had him for a few months. We've already said we're going to pay this much for him. There's no way we're recouping that amount this soon. One, and even if we did, there's no value in terms of the FFP calculations in selling a player for the same amount you just bought him for just before. There's no value in doing that. I think we'll be selling players of much more value in the sense of we can book a profit on them, right? So your Melier,
Somerville's one.
Maybe players that we don't get astronomical sums for at this point, but we get astronomical sums relative to the amount that we've paid for them, or the fact that we don't owe any money for them because they've been with the club for so long. Those sales are the most valuable in terms of what we have on the books. I think those are the players we get rid of. I think we will have a lot of good players still. I think we will bring in some players. And like I said, I think some of the youth are good enough to fill out, not all of them be starting 11 guys, but to fill out the squad reasonably at that level. I do think we will have enough to be competitive at the top of that league. I don't know if it means we come up right away or if we're sort of in that just sort of top 6 playoffs range, but God, I really hope so. The last thing we want to do is go down and be the favorites and then turn into a Stoke.
Tom says Nanto, Somerville, Harrison, and Adams will get sold. So
I agree with that.
Adams
has been around that long, but they're the most valuable assets, I think.
Adams is penned right for sale, I would think.
He wants to go, and there's already teams that are saying they want him. So
Harrison is probably sold. Nanto is probably sold. To me,
massive profit on Nanto, right? We only bought him for about $4 million.
Yeah. To me, and even a Meslier, sure. I mean, if he manages, to me, oh yeah. Well, we'll get there, Bandy. We'll get there. Bandy's always Bandy. We'll interact. We're starting. He's very or she. I'm not sure with the jumping spiders.
Bandy, we just literally put Tom's message up on the thing about who's going to get sold.
Yeah, he's salty. I'll just say that. Bandy's always salty. I think Somerville is one where we actually we need him to come down if at all possible. I think there might be some profit on him and teams would be interested, but if there's not a relegation clause because he was a U21 player that kind of got promoted and worked his way up before we bought him, I would like to keep him down. I think it would be massive to have him down there. I think he would toast fullbacks all day. Yeah. So I don't know. That's just one that I think we need to keep. Robin Koch is somebody that might go down, might want to be sold, and I don't have any love lost between them. There's guys like Bamford where it's like, who's going to pick up Bamford now? I mean, maybe they get him as a backup striker, but like I would keep him.
We won't sell Bamford because no one's going to buy him.
Yeah, I mean, keep him. He might set it on play. Rodrigo is a guy who was MLS or I can't remember, Saudi Arabia, or come down to the EFL and try to get promoted again. You can get
I
back to
think
the
he
Premier
stays.
League. Yeah, there's some guys
I
where
think
I
he
think
stays
it's
because I think he's
close.
settled.
Yeah. Yeah, he's 32. So I think
Yeah,
there's some guys here where it's like it's 50-50, where I think Harrison Adams absolutely, Nanto absolutely. You could throw maybe Pascal in there just for profitability. Meslier. Um, but I do think everybody tries to look to leave. I think they all do. I think Brendan Aronson is one that needs to come down. I think that there's some guys there that it's like, I think he come down, man. But
even the championship would do him well.
yeah, I wonder what happens to their contracts when they go down and then if they come back up. That's what I'm just yeah.
Well, I would imagine that that's worked into the contract as well. That their reduction in contract from going down would probably be wiped out if they go back up.
All right, let's catch up on your comments and then we're going to get out of here. Big Sam was a seasoned man who, when he got
Yeah,
involved with the match fixing, was England manager. We why would we
here for
open
the
ourselves to
beer.
nonsense to disrupt it? He's here for the beer. I agree.
Bandy, I mentioned that earlier, and thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, Big Sam is a controversial guy.
We should have given it to Scubala. I agree with that. I mean, all these guys are basically bred to do marsh ball. So let it just do marsh ball against these. You got pretty much three traditional top six sides. Just go ahead and let them do marsh ball. That's what I would have done, but here we are.
See if we can shit
Um,
this one. Yeah,
yeah, something happened in the locker room. We talked a little bit about that. The fans know this ownership are out of their depth.
yep,
Leeds is too big for them.
yeah,
Yeah.
Bandy. I already talked to Tom too about about the
Mm.
issues in the locker room. I'm not ignoring you guys. Come on.
I do need to do that. It's just something that I see it, but
Yeah, Rad's
it's tough
not
to
learning. Yeah, he's not learning from his mistakes, is he? Mr. Anthrop, that's correct. I think that's totally correct.
Rad Rosani is clearly not learning on the job yet.
Yeah.
He's depressing when I even bring him up. It's just I start to get like where to even begin. He's so fake. He's just so fake to me. And the fact that now it's come out that he would actually keep the club just doesn't shock me. He's just scummy. They spent loads in Marsh because they sold the two best players. Yep, I talked about that. That's what we talked about. We wanted to see a little bit more, and then things just kind of got quiet in August, and then they tried to do a couple, just again, much like the managerial search, guys that just weren't going to come. I quite like Rads and Orta. I just wish they would not talk so much. As for Orta, it is easy to love folly in a child. I'm not sure what you mean there. Bandy, you've been a Leeds United faithful fan for I think over 40 years, so you're a seasoned fan. Bielsa would have kept us up. Marsh had 32 points to play for at the time, and Marsh had 5 games. All the players were back. The man is a fish-eyed fool. You've always said that, Bandy. You've always said the fish-eyed fool line.
Uh,
Players revert.
Benny, I didn't think so at the time. I thought that it was time for Marcelo to go, only not because it was his fault, not because I didn't like him, not because I didn't believe in him, but just because it wasn't working. And so some kind of major change I felt was needed at the time. In hindsight, I agree with you. It is. I mean, we can't say because it didn't happen. We don't know what would have happened. But I think uh, certainly at the time that Marsh came back, we were just starting to get a lot of players back, and we had just gone through the toughest part of the schedule, and the fixtures got easier from there. So it is entirely possible that Bielsa would have kept us up as well.
Yeah, I. Yep, I actually I agree. The players reverted to basketball on the last day. I agree. It was kind of starting to be the best game. One of the best games was the Leicester. We lost 1-0. It was his first game, and it was very Bielsa ball esque,
Yep.
but a little modified. Um, yeah. Um, anyways, bye bye Marsh. Bye bye Javi. I'll watch. I'm a little bit detached, Michael, like you. I just don't want to see the performances that were. I mean, to Bournemouth. That's just so deflating. It's so deflating to just see this team crumble. I don't. Obviously we have Man City. We're not expecting anything from that, but with Leicester, they lost to Man City as he came in. Dean Smith, who's obviously not going to light the world on fire, but they won the second half. They scored a goal, and I know there were Man City's second team or third team in there, but the point is Dean Smith could wrap up the game and say we beat them that half 1-0. Now we go into the next game and we're going to win that game. You know what I mean? There was something to build on. Um, with 4 games, what is there to build on? I don't know, but
The floor's coming up at us. That's the problem, right?
yeah, it's the hope that kills you, Michael. Well, thank you for joining me, and
My
if you don't
pleasure.
laugh, you'd cry. So keep it light, and enjoy, enjoy. enjoy the slow death as much as possible, I guess. And I'm still going to be a fan. My message to a lot of the fans is the sun will rise in the morning, even if we get up and we're in the EFL, we're in the championship. It sucks, but we go again. And this team is bigger than the freaking owner or any. It's about the collective, the fans, the club's history. It's bigger than the players. It's bigger than all that, and the history will continue. The pages will continue to turn, and I'll be here for it. I'm interested. I'm hooked. So.
And should it happen, don't despair. Our American friends here, the games will be on, what was it, ESPN Plus,
ESPN Plus. We'll
and,
watch.
and of course LUTV as well, which you have
Yep.
to pay for. But that's an option, and to our fans in Canada, like I am, DAZN, I believe, still has the rights now. I imagine they will next year too, and quite a few Leeds games get televised that way. Just because we're such a huge draw for them. They're probably the biggest draw in that league, as well as LUTV. So there are ways to stay in touch and to watch games if we do go down. So don't despair.
Do not despair.
It won't be
Do
like
not
last
despair,
time.
Leeds United fans.
Last
So,
time we went down, I didn't see us play for a decade. So, it won't be like that again.
knock on wood. All right. Night, everybody. Thanks for joining. Smash the like on your way out. Bye.